Well, we are kind of the luckiest city in the country because Mayor Eric Garcetti is currently serving his second term. Let's just we have a great mayor, guys. Mayor Garcetti is making sure that Los Angeles is the leader in the United States for bringing the green circular economy to our city. And what we do in LA, the world follows. I was fortunate enough to attend his recent address announcing LA's Green New Deal, building a zero-carbon electricity grid, planting and maintaining at least 90,000 trees by 2021, which is in a minute from now, and recycling 100% wastewater, just to name a few. Everybody, please welcome our incredible mayor.
Thank you. Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Feeling good? I know it's dangerous to go right after lunch when everybody starts to digest, but hopefully I will keep your attention. And I'm always so excited to come here. Thank you, Debbie, to you. Thank you to the entire executive board, to David, to Lance, to Francis, to Amy, to Jaden, to everybody who has been such a huge part of 30 years of making that connection between those who can bring a message and tell a story and the work that we have to do to write the story of our Earth. We can't change the beginning of this story, but we know that we can collectively change the ending. And so I'm so excited to be here today with you, to be able to stand in front of people who understand this global emergency. I know it's the most overused phrase now. Everybody says existential crisis. Let's just say it's really, really bad. And we have to do something not only to save this planet, but to save, more importantly, because the planet will outlive us, the life on this planet, for the biodiversity, for ourselves, and for everyone who is out there. We certainly don't need more studies telling us that the reality of global warming is with us. We can look here in Los Angeles outside the window. We see it in fires burning on the edges of this city. We see it in torrential floods in cities around this country. We see temperatures that spike in the triple digits or, like we're experiencing now, uneven. I was talking to the head of FEMA for the Western United States a couple months ago, and he said that the United States spent as much in the last 2 years for natural disasters as we did in the previous 27. Let that sink in for a second. The last 2 years have cost us about $80 billion in the last 2 years, from 2016 to today, the same as it cost us from 1979 to 2016. So at this rate, climate change will erase everything else that we're working on. Who cares about our 911 response times if our firefighters aren't even here because they're at forest fires throughout the state? Or how many miles of streets, which I'm very passionate about, that we pave if Venice is underwater? If we have 1 million climate refugees coming into Los Angeles, do you think all of the other things that we're working on will even come to the forefront? But the interesting thing about this crisis, I was just talking to Lance about this, usually when a crisis comes, the longer you wait, the more expensive it is to solve, right? Somebody will come up with a principle, name it somehow, but this is the inverse of that. The longer we wait, the cheaper it is to solve this crisis and the faster we can act. In fact, pledges that we made 10 years ago now seem timid. The cost that we estimated for things like solar, electricity, are way below what our wildest dreams were just a decade ago. And so for me, it's been very exciting to hear a lot of talk in Washington, D.C. about a Green New Deal. I just came back from testifying last week in Washington on the Select Committee in Congress on this. But what I tell people, and what I said there, is you don't have to look across the aisle or across Congress to find those answers. You just look across the country and look here in LA, because I think we have that example of what it means. Now, the Green New Deal is, as I understand it, is predicated on two principles. That we address our environmental crises while also building more economic equity for everyone. This is an interesting moment we live in. In many ways, it's very exciting, but it's very anxious too. There's a lot of anxiety and excitement. I put these words together. I call it the age of anxitement. You know that feeling? Like right before you give a speech, or like that moment when your stomach kind of turns. The technology that allows us to FaceTime with like my daughter when I'm overseas and tuck her into bed, but then I wonder, is that same technological advance going to work my neighbor out of his job? The way that we can find cures to diseases that we never imagined we could cure, but at the same time, too many people struggle with just making a payment for their health care. So in this excitement, we 4 years ago, when we put out Los Angeles' first and strongest sustainable city plan, one of the strongest of any city in the world, we predicated on the 3 E's: the environment, economy, and equity. Some people said we were crazy. Like, they said, Mayor, why are you putting equity in an environmental plan? One thing is important, but it doesn't really have to do with the other. But we said the two had to go hand in hand. And if you simplify and put the economy and equity together, economic equity and environmental action are really the cornerstones of what we've put forward in LA's Green New Deal, something that we released, strengthening and going even further. In those 4 years, with 91 promises in 14 categories, we hit 91% of those on time or early. And now we're going a step further. We've invested in a record number of renewables. I was proud to make the decision to stop repowering 3 gas plants on our coast, not only for marine life, but also because we have to get beyond not just coal for electricity generation, but we have to get beyond carbon. And in the last 4 years, since emphasizing jobs in water reclamation, in recycling, in looking at what we could do to make sure we have more solar power and wind resources, we've generated 35,000 good new middle-class green jobs in one city that accounts for 1% of the population of America. Now, to put that in perspective, that's more than all the coal jobs that we lost in America during that time, and about 60% of all the coal jobs that are left in this country. So in Appalachia, in the Midwest, in the South, we have to be looking for these jobs, not just because we believe in saving this planet, but because it's good for our local economies as well. We have proved once and for all that clean air and a stronger economy go hand in hand. In 2016, we reduced, we think it might be the most of any city in the world, our greenhouse gas emissions by a whopping 11% in a single year. And for those who thought, yeah, go ahead, that's all of us, we worked on that. And sometimes these abstract numbers, let me just say what that's the equivalent of. That's like taking 737,000 cars off the road in a single year. So it's a really substantive amount. But for people who said you can't do that and have a strong economy, 11% down in emissions, that same year unemployment went down 14% in the city. And our economy is outpacing New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Houston, the other 4 big cities in America, and the average in America. So we know these things can, do, and must go together. And of course, LA was bold, and many of you voted for it. I hope all of you did if you live in LA County, for Measure M, which is the biggest local transportation initiative in American history ×2, to extend and or build a new 15 rapid transit lines. We apologize for the traffic today, but that's the result of finally getting a subway, for instance, that will come here down Wilshire Boulevard, get people out of cars and take you from Westwood to downtown in 22 minutes. This is progress. This is, and by the way, with Measure M, 787,000 new jobs will be created. So the next recession that comes, the next time people look to ship jobs overseas, these are recession-proof, non-exportable jobs right here in our backyard because we stepped up and we said we wanted to pay for a new way of getting around the city without the emissions that we have from single-passenger gas-burning cars. But as technological innovation accelerates, unfortunately, so does climate change. And that's why last month we announced LA's Green New Deal, something that we envision and will execute. And it's predicated on 5 main pillars. 1, a Los Angeles where every building, every skyscraper, every home will be emissions-free by 2050. We're going to get there by adopting the most comprehensive decarbonization programs of any big city in America. And we'll never build another municipal building that is powered with gas. When I released the first Sustainable City Plan, I told you that 25% of our vehicles would be zero emissions by 2035. Excuse me, that was ambitious. But looking back on it, like I said, it didn't seem ambitious enough. So we relaunched that goal, and we said that we will, instead of being 25% zero emission vehicles by 2035, we will be 80% by 2035. And 100% by 2050. But I want to push further. Our port, the busiest in the Western Hemisphere, will have a 100% zero emissions cargo handling equipment by 2030. That's only in 11 years, and there hasn't ever been in modern times a zero emission port. So it's very exciting with my brother, Mayor Robert Garcia, who's in charge of Long Beach. You know, we have the twin ports down there that account for 43% of all the goods that come into America by sea. So every Christmas present, every hardware store item, every gift item, anything that comes from Asia and other parts of the world comes in through those twin ports. So we are driving a new economy, going to those people who manufacture equipment and trucks and cars and saying, we now have the marketplace for this. And together, because I'm the vice chair of C40, a global network of mayors, we're now pulling Hong Kong into this, we're pulling ports in Europe into this. Ports are the biggest polluters usually in cities around the world that go unregulated, but we can change that here. Third, we're going to become the biggest zero-waste city in the country, a city where we won't send a single piece of trash to the landfill. And we set that goal 4 years ago. But then fourth, we set a goal in the first plan to produce 50% of our water locally by 2035. You've all seen Chinatown, I hope, the movie. We stole water from Owens Valley a long time ago. Get this number. That LA aqueduct that you see coming through the San Fernando Valley, we now only get about 15% of our water locally from LA, from underground or from recycling in the area. We said that we will take all of our wastewater and recycle that. That's the equivalent of building 3 LA aqueducts. And we will get to a place where we will recycle 100% of our wastewater by 2035 and move 15% of our water being local up to 70%. And remember, to move that water takes a lot of electricity, a lot of energy, so we will reduce our emissions even further there. And then finally, we will lay out in the Green New Deal a plan for a city where we power our homes and our offices with 100% clean energy. That is, in some ways, the most important thing we can do, whether it's solar, wind, or hydropower. But when we put these things together, we will reduce our city's emissions by an additional 30%. To put that in perspective, that's more than the emissions that we have in New York in a given year, in London in a given year, in Hong Kong in a given year combined. So our top priority is making sure that this New Deal, isn't just something that we do as environmentalists, but that we do it for our economy and it supports everyone. Today, if you're a truck driver, a port worker, with automation looming, you don't know if your children will have that job. You don't even know if you'll have that job in a few years. Jobs in Los Angeles won't disappear, but they will have to change and we will have to lead. So I'd really encourage you to think about that. We've put together a green jobs cabinet to ensure, for instance, that our building trades workers who today, without a college degree, are earning as much as $100,000, $120,000 working on things like oil rigs or in some of our refineries. We have to make sure we don't just say, oh, don't worry, somebody's going to get a new job, you're going to lose yours. But how do we transition those people to a new clean energy job and guarantee them the training and the job security at the end, because they're looking at this and they're saying, I'm scared of that future. Can't we push out changing off of gas? Can't we stay with oil for a little bit longer? And we have to bring them and make sure that they are as strong a part of this coalition as anybody else. Decades from now, if we do this right, our Green New Deal won't have just repowered this earth, but we'll have repowered our economy and hopefully inspired the rest of the world to meet the LA standard. We are up to this because cities aren't just abstract places where we talk about policies or plans. We actually have to have programs. We have to make sure the lights turn on of your Department of Water and Power, and I know David Wright, the head of LADWP, will be speaking here tomorrow. And we need to get everyone on board, which is why I'm so glad that the Environmental Media Association exists. We need people in front of and behind the cameras to tell these stories of human beings saving this planet and human beings helping their fellow human beings with a job, with a future, with the security that they need. We need the entertainment industry to continue its amazing leadership, to pick up the mantle, to use their platforms to challenge people to change the way they think and, more importantly, the way that they act. And I know it isn't easy. Some of this is going to be messy, and some of it is going to require trying new things and failing forward. But there's no question, this is the fight of our lives. And I believe in you. I believe in this city. We'll have criticisms as we act. Some people saying, go further tomorrow, and I always say, I will promise as extreme a promise as I can any given year, and I will revise that the coming year if you show me even new technology and new things. There'll be those who say, slow down, we can't afford to do this economically. And like I said, we have to show them the pathway to speed up their thinking and our actions. But think about our parents and our grandparents, what they did to win wars, to get us to the moon, to bring water to this parched pueblo. Now we have the opportunity to do the same. And I'll end, because I just got to 0 seconds, with a quote from Robert Browning, who has an incredible poem about Andrea del Sarto, the great artist. And there's a line in it that I love that says, "A man's reach must always exceed his grasp." And we'll make it a man or woman's reach must always exceed their grasp. In other words, we in history have always reached for things we may not be able to hold. American history is complete with this, as world history is. The slave who reached for her freedom, but died still in bondage. The woman who said women should be able to vote, but was never able to do that in an election, but did that so a future generation would. A GI who never came home from a war to protect our freedoms. A farm worker who said that her child shouldn't die of pesticides and cancer. Folks who stretched further to reach out to marry whom they loved, even though they couldn't marry the person they were with their entire life because there wasn't marriage equality. We do these things because one day, if we continue to make sure that our reach exceeds our grasp, someday somebody will. And that is the fight that we're in. So the second line of that poem is, after a man's reach must always exceed his grasp, it says, after all, what's a heaven for? And I would say, what's a Los Angeles for, if not that? Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful conference. I look forward to working with you for a long time. Thank you.